Welcome to UpYourStack Podcast. I'm your host, Noah Berk. I'm also the co-CEO of Aptitude 8, which is an elite HubSpot solutions partner. Every week, we feature some of our favorite app developers who've either built their apps on HubSpot or who have integrated with HubSpot to help you get the most out of your HubSpot tech stack. And today, man, I've been excited for this guest. He is with PandaDoc. His name is Keith. He's the Chief Revenue Officer over here. We go way back, so this will be a really fun conversation where Keith, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. It's good to see you again. I feel like we were just in person in Atlanta a few weeks ago. So nice to be catching up a few weeks later and on a positive upswing to close the year out.
Agreed. Well, Keith, let's just dive right into it. For the audience who may or may not be aware of PandaDoc, what does PandaDoc do?
So PandaDoc is a software app that is a single solution to all your agreement needs. So I like to think we help people get those agreements closed. Those agreements could be, typical contracts. They could be sales proposals. They could be complex quotes, but that's what we do. And we do them particularly for sellers and ops folks. Rev ops and sales are our primary buyers, but of course we also service small companies that don't have defined jobs, right? I, as a co-CEO, you can't define your job just by like one title, sales, ops, you're everything. So we do that for a lot of smaller companies. We do it for HR, for, employment agreements, legal, for NDAs, any kind of agreement that you need, no matter how complex, PandaDoc is the single solution for it.
Gotcha. And so obviously you're solving this from the standpoint of making it easier for people to be able to send over contracts versus I guess the alternative is put together a Word document and download it as a PDF and send it to someone. They have to PDF sign it. And is that even legit? Would that even hold up in court?
So it's so interesting because a lot of them are legit, right? Like I remember, a couple of years ago, not even that far ago, people would get a document, they would actually download it, print it, sign it, scan it, and send it back. We're a little more advanced than that now, right? But even other solutions, what you'll see is people will download the PDF, open a tool on their desktop, sign it in the tool, send it back, or they'll do it online. But then they still want to sign it, they still want to download it and resend it. And we've created the solution that not only makes it easy to send, but it keeps everything together. And where we really differentiate ourselves and think that PandaDoc is the best solution on the market is that we talk about time to value. We talk about how do we help our customers get those documents out quickly without a lot of pain. I don't know if you've ever done this, Noah, but do you ever look to upload a document off your desktop into the browser and you can't remember what's in your folder, which folder it's in,
All the
all that
time.
stuff?
All
Yeah.
the time.
So we solve that. We help you do that. And then we have a lot of smart content. I wouldn't call it AI, but smart content that helps you customize the template and the information in that template based on what you know about the person you're sending it to, whether it's their title, the state they live in, the vertical. You can pull in different content for that.
So why do you suppose PandaDoc's gotten so much traction over the years? Like what's led to that growth? What's led to that traction? How did you gain all that traction?
So I think there's a couple things, one of which I know you're going to love, which is that relationship with ecosystem partners. We've really tried to build a better together solution. There's a lot of solutions that pre-existed on the market. They've built integrations. Those integrations are just clunky, or they're there to check a box on the website that says, yep, we've got an integration with HubSpot. What we've done is we've really tried to make our integrations as native as possible because we care about the customer experience. And so I think that integration, that being part of an ecosystem, is a big piece of our success. The second is that we've really focused on the user. So our founders, our great R&D team, our great CSM team really try to bring all out stops to make sure that our customers get to value. And so I think what you would see if you use PandaDoc, and I know you have, is that it's this very elegant, easy to use solution. It's easy to find where things are in the product. It's easy to get to value. And I don't think that's the case in software that was built, 20 years ago and then kind of refreshed for the market. Like we've sort of built this with the end customer in mind.
Agreed. And I think a lot of people would agree that a lot of the existing solutions on the market feel bulky. They're cumbersome, they're difficult to make changes, they're difficult to push changes to the rest of the organization. And, for everyone who's listening today, we are a PandaDoc user. And not only that, we're also partners with PandaDoc. So I'm a huge fan of the product to begin with and everything that PandaDoc's doing. But how do you suppose you differentiate from the competitors in the marketplace?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest, well, first off, thank you for being a customer and a partner. I mean, I think it's one thing, like everybody, we have a lot of partners because, there's a mutual business arrangement, but the fact that you're a customer means that you continue to get value, and we continue to have to earn your business year after year because we are a SaaS company. So it makes me really happy that we've done that. So I'll start with that, which is we take a lot of pride in our customer service, right? There's a lot of companies out there that take advantage of their customers. Their pricing practices aren't transparent. They don't lead with the customer. And
Yeah.
again, as we talked about a second ago, I think that is something that really does differentiate us.
Yeah.
But as a CRO, I don't just run sales, I run customer success too. And the renewal is just as important to me as the initial business. And so that means that I've got to continue to drive that value throughout every engagement with the customer. Same as you guys do at Aptitude 8,
Sure.
right? You're not looking for let me implement and move on. You want this continued relationship. So we care about that. That's one important thing. The second is ease of use, which is we are just much easier to use than the competition. And when you think about like the consumerization of B2B software, we have all come to expect so much of the consumer products, whether they're our phones or the browser or apps, that we now expect when we consume business products. And PandaDoc brings that. We're a delightful, easy to use product rather than something that is clunky and designed, from
Yeah.
15 or 20 years ago. So those are probably the top two, I would say. But I think the other one is just like that persona specific.
Yeah.
More and more we're leaning into what is the job that you as the CEO want to accomplish and how can PandaDoc help you get there? For sales, it's the same thing. For ops, we really think about making sure there's no errors. We think about making sure that you can spend your time on more value add instead of like dealing with approval workflows. And so that's really important in how we've built this product.
And is this a product that requires like an ops team to set up for you, or is this a product that, in your opinion, just your standard frontline salespeople, they can go ahead and set up the templates? Like, walk me through, like, is there a differentiation in terms of function of who's actually setting it up versus who's using it from the end user perspective? Or are they one and the same?
I think it depends on the level of complexity you want. If I go back in time, over 10 years ago when Makita and Sergey, my CEO and CTO, founded this company, they built it for really small businesses. They
Mhm.
built a product they wanted to, they call it like bust bureaucracy because they came out of Eastern Europe where, everything was this like, the evolution of the Soviet machine. And
Mhm.
they wanted to make it easy for small businesses to have the power that software was bringing to larger companies. And so
Yeah.
they started with ease of use as a core principle. And that led to being able to send out easy contracts and quotes that any company could set up. Like you can go start a trial for PandaDoc today and you can get a document out the door, in 10 minutes easily.
Wow.
But then you start layering on more complexity, right? You want branching logic for rules, or you want something that's more complex, like a true CPQ that has complex pricing mechanics in it. That's where you do start to need a little bit of ops help. Like I personally would have trouble setting that up myself. One day, maybe AI will do it for us, but I think today we're still at that place where that does require a little bit more of a nuance.
And it's good. I mean, sometimes people are afraid of the complexity, but in reality, for certain organizations, is because they have all these edge use cases, they need that certain degree of complexity to make it configurable for their teams. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think what you guys have done really well is have a product that is both, to your point, simple for an end user to come in and set something up and send a contract out in 10 minutes, but also something that's complex and configurable enough that a large organization can use it for their entire team and push it out to everyone. So on that note, who is your ideal customer at this stage? Like who is someone coming in to buy PandaDoc?
I would say any small to medium sized business that wants to automate their document workflows to get agreements out the door. Um, like I said, that's probably a bit more broad than what I would say is an ICT. So let me reframe my answer, which is sales and ops leaders that want to drive optimization of their workflow to prevent errors and give their teams time back to engage with customers. That is the focus. Now,
Mm,
again, we do a lot for HR companies, healthcare companies, staffing, legal teams, but we've chosen really to focus on these sales and ops leaders because those are the people who continue to see the most value out of our platform and find a truly differentiated solution.
that's awesome. Now, what I'm really excited to talk to you guys or talk to you about today is what you announced and what you shared at Inbound, HubSpot Inbound Conference. For all of you who may have seen, was the integration that PandaDoc built with HubSpot and how you're able to essentially have a fully functional CPQ within HubSpot. Let's talk a little bit more about HubSpot and kind of the gaps you're filling in the ecosystem and what you guys have been working on, because I think this is one of the most exciting developments in the ecosystem.
Yeah, so HubSpot's been a tremendous partner, and they opened up access to us early to engage and develop our CPQ within, the user interface of Sales Hub itself. And so I think when you think about CPQ, you hear these horror stories of 9-month implementations,
Yeah,
$120,000 spent in services, and then people still aren't happy with it. Like at Inbound, I was actually walking the floor and talking to people at all the different booths. And I was saying, what CPQ do you use? And almost regardless of what the answer was, the people who were manning the booths, which typically are sellers, were saying, we hate it. We just do not like our CPQ. And I heard 5 different CPQs mentioned, all of them the sellers did not like. And then I asked, how does your RevOps team like it? There were a couple of RevOps people there, not too many. And for the most part, they're like, it took a really long time to implement and it's really hard. And we still have to kick back sales agreements when we have to redo the quote, which you inevitably do, right? The deals
yeah,
change so fast. You get the first quote out, somebody wants a revision. Some CPQs, you've got to start over. So what we did, and again, all the credit in the world to our amazing R&D team, they built this directly in HubSpot, and they built it to be easy for the sellers. The sellers spend their time in their CRM. As much as I love PandaDoc, they probably don't want to go into PandaDoc. So they spend it in the place they're already, which is Sales Hub. And then we've made it really elegant with a guided flow that just steps them through all the steps, because CPQ can be complicated. If you are a seller, your job is not to be an expert in pricing or configuration. Like there's rules around it. Let's program the rules into the system and let the system dictate the next steps. So we've made it elegant. And then lastly, for the ops team, we want it to be flexible. Your business is changing rapidly. So you can't go back. Sorry. I mean, I know it could be to Aptitude 8's benefit to like have another implementation, but I'm kidding because I know
I
you guys
do
are like,
like those additional implementations when they need help on a CPQ. So I do like that, Keith. But keep going. I know where you're going with this. I
but
want it
you're,
easy for my clients too.
but you are a customer
Correct.
centric organization, and
Correct.
so I think we want you to get to value in the initial, and then we want it to be easy to change, right? Like the lightweight
Correct.
changes, your SKUs change, shouldn't be a re-implementation case.
Agreed.
And so the team built it in a way to accomplish that.
Yeah, and I'm in 100% agreement. I think it follows kind of what we talked about in the HubSpot ecosystem as an elite partner, is that there's other various CRMs out there that require heavy dev, heavy admin to support you, and oftentimes in HubSpot, even for complex use cases and large, upmarket enterprises, you're spending maybe a third to a quarter of the amount of time on outsourced resources to do what would have required, you know, let's say you need 10 hours a month from one organization, maybe only 2 to 3 hours in the HubSpot comparison. And it sounds like you guys have built your product in a very similar way. Yeah, there's always going to be some need for resources, but not to the extent these other solutions needed. And it enables organizations to move more quickly. And I think that is the big key here is the speed to get things done. And what you guys have built in the HubSpot ecosystem, I think is huge because it was a really big missing component. Now, one question people may have, and they're probably oblivious to, what is CPQ? Maybe we should talk about that for a second. And how do they know to go from sending a standard contract, like a standard document with a signature and you just put in your line items, to a CPQ? At what point do they need to make that transition?
Yeah, so I think CPQ, which stands for configure price quote, is like fundamentally a rules-based engine that allows complex pricing use cases, which otherwise you're going to deal desk all the time and asking them to put together custom quotes where they're using an offline tool a spreadsheet, or even another system to pull all this information based on how SKUs go together. So typically you think some SKUs you might sell together and they always come as a bundle. Some SKUs you can't put together. They actually conflict, right? If you're, selling two versions of a CRM, you're probably not going to install both of those.
Sure.
And then recurring logic, right? Does the SKU change over time based on the renewal? These are all complex rules that need to be accounted for in the pricing and feed into the quote. So our system actually pulls this out of your product catalog and allows your ops team to set these up so that your sales reps literally can't send out the wrong quote. It's impossible. So you spare errors, you spare your deal desk and your ops team time from having to do these things manually, and you save the back and forth negotiation between the sellers and the ops team.
It's a huge time saving. So if you notice you're having to go back to another team, quote your deal desk team as you describe them, maybe people call them something else, and you're asking them to put together the contract for you, that's where you may say, okay, I need a CPQ solution at this point and looking at something like PandaDoc. How often are people switching from one CPQ to another? So how often is it a matter of, I have a CPQ solution, you heard all these pain points, and they're like, enough is enough. We need something different.
So typically it's been hard because there haven't been a lot of players on the market. And when you look at the different players, you see a lot of the same challenges, right?
Mhm.
Like hard to implement. So am I going to switch from something that took me a year to implement and six figures to implement to another thing that's going to take me another year and six figures to implement? Probably not. Like it's got to be really painful. But what we're trying to do is come up with something that is just much easier and solves all those pain points such that we get people to switch more often. And we really do think it's differentiated. I mean, it's one of the reasons we showed up in such force at Inbound to tell the HubSpot CPQ story, because it's a wholly new way of interfacing with a CPQ right out of Sales Hub,
Mhm.
and the implementation is just so much easier.
Yeah. And if you haven't seen it, it's slick. Check it out. I'm sure there's a lot of videos out there that shows how it works.
We we just put up a case study today, so, check
Heck
it out
yeah.
on Link.
Now, this is probably being released in a couple months. So today means back November 19th, is it today? I think so.
Yeah.
Maybe. I just dated us. I've never done that on a podcast before. But now you know when this episode was produced. So let's talk a little bit more about what's the future roadmap for PandaDoc look like? And then how is AI going to play a role in this?
So for CPQ, we're gonna continue to develop. We're gonna add adjacent functionality, even more complex pricing rule sets, particularly for verticals. We see a lot of customers coming for healthcare, finance, and manufacturing today,
Mhm.
technology as well. So we'll continue to evolve there. We'll also add more of this billing functionality. So a lot of CPQs do the subscription management behind the scenes. Today, ours doesn't,
Mm.
which means that you can plug into Commerce Hub, you can plug into Stripe, you can plug into another platform. We'll probably integrate more of those to be out of the box plug and play. So that'll be really nice because the companies that have a recurring subscription can actually do the billing straight from the platform. So that's a big one for us. And then I think we'll do more with AI to help with the implementation. So can we even make the setup just that much easier by including like an agent that can help you configure and set up the rule set? Because that is still, even though we think we have something much easier than the competition, we think we can still do better.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great that you guys are working towards that and making life easier for everyone and leveraging AI in some capacity, which I know everyone's trying to figure out how. How do we use AI in our software to make the job easier for our people? Keith, I'm going to take a little turn here. Being a CRO and having a lot of experience, what advice do you have for other CROs who may be listening to this podcast? You're in an interesting spot. You're selling services to generally CROs. And what advice do you have for them?
I think sometimes as CROs, we look at problems and we tackle the problem at like the highest level. So pipeline is short, or revenue is below plan. It's like a very high level. And I think one thing I found really helpful is to break it down into its components. So if it's pipeline by what source?
Mm.
Let's take inbound pipeline. Okay. It's coming from qualified leads. Is it the number of qualified leads? Is it the quality of the leads? Is it the activity of the sales force? Is it the value of the leads? Like when you start decomposing things, I think you get a better handle on the activities that allow you to go change the outcome. And it allows you to find the right DRI to go tackle it. Because if you say, hey, I've got an inbound pipeline problem, you're probably going to like your marketing leader, but maybe the problem is actually on the sales team with how they're qualifying the leads. And so understanding and decomposing these things into smaller bite-sized pieces allows you to tackle them much more easily.
That's great advice. Biting off more you can chew, or not having the opportunity to look at the right problem, but really biting smaller pieces and chunks and getting in there. I think that's great advice, and hopefully will help some people tackle it more easily versus being overwhelmed for how do we solve this? Because I'm sure the CEO is, I know from my own experience, to my CRO is, what are we doing to increase this?
Yeah. Yeah. I think probably the other one would be just like back to that don't bite off more than you can chew. One thing, probably the best CEOs I've ever worked for would say is don't have too many priorities. Like you've got to just narrow things down to the one that's going to move the lever the most. And it's really hard for me. This is my area for development, is because I want to do it all, and my team is like, Keith, like, can you reduce the set of OKRs a bit? And it's
Can
a
you get
great
three?
challenge.
Can you get three? All I need is three.
Yes, I think 3 is a good number, but, like, 3 big rocks that you're gonna concentrate on to disproportionately move the needle. Otherwise, you just fragment people's time too much, and they have a hard time accomplishing everything you're trying to do, because there is a cost to context switching.
Agreed 100%. Well, Keith, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for joining and sharing your insights and talking about PandaDoc today. And, Keith, if people are interested to learn more about you, more about PandaDoc, how do they go about finding out this information?
Yeah, PandaDoc.com, or find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active. Odds are there's a pretty strong chance if you're not selling to me that I will write you back.
You
I
get a
might
lot of
write.
sales emails and Slacks and
Oh my
LinkedIn
god.
messages from people.
Holy moly. It's crazy.
Actually, I don't get phone calls anymore. I just get Slack messages and emails.
I get a lot of phone calls, but they go, I've got like the voice filtering on, the call
Mhm.
filtering. Just go to voicemail.
Yeah. Well, Keith, thank you again so much for joining. And listeners, thank you so much for listening today. And it really wraps up our call, or I should say our podcast. Again, Up Your Stack is a weekly podcast featuring HubSpot app partners and developers who built their apps on HubSpot or integrate with HubSpot to help you get the most out of it. Again, I'm Noah, co-host or the host of the show, as well as co-CEO of Aptitude 8. And if you'd like to learn more about leveling up your own HubSpot, feel free to reach out to us at www.aptitude8.com. We'd be happy to chat with you. And again, thanks for listening.